So we've been working on chapter 14, which is about conformity, and conformity is the basic theory that people in a group feel pressured to conform to group opinion.
And there's 10 situational factors that influence how an individual may or may not conform to a group.
So the first one is overt rewards. So I don't know if you noticed, but as James and I have been talking, one of us will nod or make eye contact or something along those lines as the other one's talking. So this is an example of an overt reward. That may be a smile, it may be a head nod, it may be getting a badge or like rewarding a person with friendship.
All right, the second one is public scrutiny. This is essentially the private vote versus public vote idea, because there's a big difference between someone's public compliance versus private acceptance of an idea. Compliance is essentially referring to public statements and outward behavior. Because they're open to the public, they are also available to the outward scrutiny of others. However, private acceptance is a bit different. A group cannot monitor what a person believes. Therefore, it's not unusual to have a person go along with what a group wants on the outside, while inside maintaining reservations about what might be going on.
So a third example of situational factors is no true partner. So the author told a story about a group of girls who were going to a boarding school. The boarding school got all new teachers, and all of the teachers were liberal. And they did this because they knew most of the girls were conservative. They wanted to see if by the end most of the girls turned liberal, and then a few years later they wanted to see if they maintained that liberal stance. When coming to the final conclusions, the girls were asked if they maintained their liberal stance or their conservative stance, and it seemed unanimous that if they had married a partner who was liberal, they were still liberal. However, if they went straight back into their families, or they didn't have another friend or somebody like that who had that liberal stance, they were more likely to become conservative.
Following that is the concept of attraction to the group. The more attractive a group is to its members, the greater its influence will have on them. A warm, close-knit group is particularly potent because it's kind of able to employ a friendly persuasion. In this way, it can help an individual accept ideas that might have put them off in another situation or by a different group.
So the fifth situational factor is commitment to continue. We've all kind of experienced this when we're growing up on the playground or something like that. If a child doesn't get their way, sometimes they'll be like, well, I'm just going to go play with someone else, or I'm just going to go home. And that's an example of commitment to continue. So if there's an option that a person knows that they don't have to stay with this group, or they may never see this group again, they will be less likely to conform to the group's ideas. Conformity theory suggests that there are three options for those who feel the pressure towards uniformity. The first is that they can leave the group. The second is that they can get the group to change their opinion. And the third is that they themselves can change their own opinion.
And this also leads into the factor of status difference and how status is perceived, because status is relative. Because you might be held in high regard by one group, but thought of as a fool in another group. It's also very subjective, because in conformity, it doesn't matter how competent you are, just how competent you think you are.
The seventh situational factor is large discrepancy. So the greater the discrepancy between an individual's position and the one held by the group, the more pressure that the individual feels to conform to the group's opinion, or the more pressure that he will feel to change his mind.
Leading into that is relevance to the group goal. So the group members would be much more tolerant of a strange idea when it doesn't necessarily touch on their purpose of being together. However, to counter this, if an idea is relevant, then the pressure to conform will be significantly greater to try and get an individual to align with the group's beliefs.
The ninth situational factor is lack of prior commitment to an issue. So, for example, if somebody does not feel the strong conviction about a certain issue, they'll be more likely to conform to the group.
Following that, the last factor to touch on is uncertainty. The fuzzier a situation is, the more likely we are to depend on someone else's observations and judgment to define what is appropriate behavior. It follows that in a completely ambiguous social situation, it might end up producing total conformity. Because we have a want to have some sort of objective reality to view things, we are likely to depend on others.